At 16 years old, Megan McDonald was suddenly running a mortgage company after her father suffered a massive stroke. A few years later, she's sneaking into industry events using someone else's name tag and ends up getting her first real opportunity. Today, she's a senior vice president of single family sales at MCAP, one of the most respected sales organizations in the country. And in this episode, she shares in her journey the hard lessons that she had to learn, the bold moves she made, and a couple of takeaways that I found from this conversation: why taking responsibility early on can completely change your confidence in future, how networking and visibility create opportunities that resumes never will, and finally, the preparation mindset top performers must have if you want to be consistent and win. Hey, I'm Scott Beckford. This is the I Love Mortgage Brokering podcast, and each week we bring you conversations to inspire you, to give you tactics and tools for your business. And I absolutely love this conversation with Megan. These are some of the stories that her and I have chatted about over the years, and I thought, why have I never had her on the podcast? So I'm very excited to have her on here and share her story with you. Before we jump into this, I want to give a shout out to our sponsor, Ownwell. Ownwell is an amazing tool for Canadian brokers. It allows them to send out these reports to get a 60 to 70% open rate. It shows the borrower their buying power, their home equity, as well as what their options are for their mortgage. And they work really well because people care about it's their own information. If you're interested in them, check out ownwell.ca/Scott and check out this conversation with Megan. Hey, Megan, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me.
So I'm very excited to chat with you. We've had numerous discussions offline, and you've such an amazing story. You're a great storyteller, and I'm excited to just kind of dive into that today. So maybe before anybody, in case somebody doesn't know who you are, maybe let's just start. Who are you? And then I'm going to go back to the beginning in a minute here, but just start with that.
Yeah, absolutely. My name is Megan McDonald. I'm the Senior Vice President of Single Family Sales for MCAP. I have the pleasure of running the national sales team and working with mortgage brokers across the country every single day.
Okay, but you didn't start out there. It wasn't like in kindergarten. You thought, this is what I'm going to do when I grow up. So there was a path. So maybe if you want to take me back to, how did you even get into the mortgage business? Because from my understanding, you got into it pretty young, unintentionally too.
Yeah, absolutely unintentionally. I think, and I hope a lot of your viewers can relate. I was quite a troubled teenager, actually. Was getting into a lot of mischief, not great grades, struggling, not going to school a lot, kind of playing hooky, doing all those wonderful things. And then we had what a lot of families go through. We had a family tragedy. My father had a massive stroke when I was 16. And at that time, my mother was not working and everything was basically my dad. It was his business. It was his income. It was his world. And when he suffered that massive stroke, everything changed for our family. And within a couple of weeks, it was determined that I would become the president of his numbered company, which would manage syndicated mortgages. And
so was it a MIC or what was it exactly?
Yeah, it was a numbered company, and we acted as if we were a MIC. We worked with other MICs in our area, and we would do syndicated mortgages, and we would partner up with them in the second mortgage space. And here I am at 16 years old. And my father decided that who better off than the troubled kid who can't seem to sit in one place. And I'll never forget the first board meeting I ever walked into was actually in Kelowna. We were partnering with the MIC in Kelowna. And I walked in the door and this gentleman said to me, "Honey, are you lost?" And I said, "No, honey, I'm not lost at all." And I came in and I sat down. And I was probably wearing a dirty t-shirt and a pair of jeans. And I will tell you, though, it was that moment sitting in that chair, it felt natural. And it shouldn't have. It should have felt awkward. I should have felt low self-confidence. I should have felt like I didn't belong. Primarily, the people in the room were probably over the age of 45. And here I am, 16 years old. Majority of them were men. And here I am, one of the major shareholders. And I am in a position where my opinions matter. And I got to tell you, it was addictive from the very beginning.
You're like, I like this a lot.
I really like this.
Right. So can you share maybe what's one story or something that happened in that period that made it was like either something you learned, or I'm just curious, like there must have been many things that happened, but what's one that sticks out to you?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, when my friends were all taking spring break and they were all partying and having fun, I was driving around doing drive-bys, appraisals, like checking if there was actually a home on the lot, checking to see if that place actually existed, checking to see if the address was even true or legal. And I remember one time my father and I had made a decision, and I would obviously converse with him about a lot of the decisions we were making, that we would do a second mortgage on a llama farm. And we ended up actually owning that farm in the end, which was one of those, mistakes you make. You think you want to go into one property. You think you want to take a risk on the client. You think it all makes sense in the end. And then you take some losses. And so with that came this whole idea of being responsible. There's one thing about making a decision. It's another thing when that decision goes bad, that you actually hold the weight of that responsibility. It's still a funny story in our family today, the things that we have ended up with in our lives due to a bad decision. But what I will tell you is it really did shape my future, even though it ended up to be a funny family story. It really does change a pivotal moment in my life where I understood that things you sign up on paper, there's a real reality to them later. And when you're young, you say and do things that you don't always feel the magnitude of, where you think, oh, later down the line, it won't have an impact. At 16, I'm making these big life decisions. And suddenly the gravity of responsibility is really heavy. But here's the other thing about that. Just like that board meeting, the responsibility, even though it was heavy, I loved to carry it.
You're like, I got this. Yeah, I want to do this. I'm not going to run from it. Yeah, whether or not you got it, you'll figure it out. But okay, so you were going through this phase. So what was your biggest lesson or takeaway, I guess, from that period when you were running the MIC for your dad at 16, and how long did that period last?
Yeah, great question. So I became president of the MIC, or a numbers company, you would say, when I was 16. I put back the ownership of that company in my father's name around the age of 21 when I had finished university. And the reason why we had done that is we had actually moved the majority of the money then into other local MICs. So it was less of a management process for us. We didn't have to have as much hands-on. Plus, I wanted to start my own career. What I would say I learned from that is that if I was to talk to young people today, I would say don't veer away from heavy responsibility early in life. In fact, if anything, what I am bear to witness around me today is we really shield young people from tough decisions. We really shield them from the weight of the world. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I think young people today, more than anything, are actually prepared for way more than we're willing to give them. And whether that's delegation of responsibility or whether that's putting them in charge of something, character is only built if you actually test it. And I was tested very young, and that test has paid off for my whole life.
Right. Amazing. Okay. So that's great advice. So next stage is, I guess, university, or what was the next kind of chapter that you went to?
Yeah. So I barely graduated high school. In fact, I believe there was a call that was made to my father that suggested the idea that...
Well, you were probably running this MIC and,
yeah, I was, and I still wasn't a great kid. To be honest, I still was wrestling with this concept of school, wrestling with the idea of having a schedule and all those things, very young, very driven. And I think it pretty much came down to the high school determining that it was just probably best if we parted ways. So I think there was an aid in that graduation process. Very nice of them to do that. And then my parents said, "What do you want to do?" And I said, "Well, I do want to go to university." And they had to have that tough conversation with me to say, you don't have the grades. So I ended up going to Camosun College in Victoria, and then I ended up doing their university transfer program and actually got into UVic, where I did my 4-year degree in political science. And what I'd say is, again, another wonderful opportunity through education to understand responsibility. And not only that, understanding what it takes to start something and finish something. And I don't mean something in a weekend. I don't mean a task in a day. I mean committing yourself to 4 years. If people ask me what was the greatest thing you learned in university, no, it wasn't about the parliament. It was about political systems. It was about the idea that what you start, you finish.
Yeah. And you can stick to a longer term goal, because it is not a short term thing. You're not getting it done in a week, like you said, even a few months. It's a long term.
Absolutely. Yeah. And the other thing you really learn is working with people, not just the people in your classroom, but the university professors. It takes all kinds. And every time you hit that next course, you're like, oh, I don't like this guy. I don't like the way they teach. I don't like her. I feel like she has it out for me. And you have to make a decision right then and there that you're going to stop pointing the finger out into the world and start pointing it inward. And university definitely gave me the opportunity to learn that about myself and others.
Okay. So then maybe what's the next stage is kind of in the mortgage business. So can you tell me how you ended up back in the mortgage business, even though I guess a political science degree is not really related to our industry at all. So how did you end up here?
Yeah. I mean, if you ask anybody who has a political science degree, they'll probably be honest with you and tell you why they chose it. It's because it's one of the easiest degrees you can get. I wasn't looking for the hardest path at that point. I was kind of looking for green light, go. So I ended up with this political science degree. I ended up actually going to another school thereafter called BCIT, the BC Institute of Technology, where I did a post-degree diploma. And actually, I'm one credit short, if I'm going to be honest, one credit short because my first husband, in fact, was my accountant tutor. We didn't do a lot of accounting at the time. We got a lot of other things done, and I ended up marrying him. So once I left that story, I found myself unemployed, educated, with a pretty funny resume.
Mm-hmm.
Who has, at 16 years old, be able to put on a resume, president of running $1 billion in mortgages? Not many.
Yeah.
And so usually you can imagine somebody took a real quick look at that and tossed it in the garbage pretty quick.
They said it's got to be fake.
Yeah, it's got to be fake, and understandably so.
Yeah.
My father's good friend had mentioned to him that there was an event happening in Kelowna, and it happened to be a CMB-ABC event at the time, MBAC as it was called. And I was encouraged to drive down there to see if there was an opportunity for employment. And in typical fashion, I'm now a university graduate. I'm a bum. I have no money. I've got a student loan. I got to figure something out. So I drive down there. And
you haven't registered in advance or anything?
No, nothing like that. Haven't registered, haven't paid. And I show up, and of course, I find out that you got to pay, and you got to belong, and you got to register. Well, I don't have a computer with me. I'm not ready to do this. I don't have the money. I came down here in a hope and a prayer. And so, I hate to share this, but I will. I grabbed a name tag off the table and slipped in the side door. Now,
that's so funny. That's so funny. I love these. This story kills me because that's like a Jesse Itzler move. Like, you know who he is, right? Jesse Itzler.
Yes.
Yeah. I'm like, that is something he would totally do. It's like, yeah, there's an obstacle. I'm just going to go around it. Like, I'm not even going to think. So the fact you just grabbed a name tag. So what happened? You got this name tag that's obviously not you.
Yeah. So I got a name tag. All right. A name of someone who is quite well known in the industry. So within 5 minutes, and I mean, I did a lot of damage in 5 minutes. Do know that. But within 5 minutes, somebody came over and ripped that name right off my chest and said, "You are not who you say you are, and you are out of here." And I mean, I wasn't surprised. I had been a troubled teenager. I knew what it was like to break some rules, and I knew what it was like to try to get away with something. So I smiled, thanked them for their time, and of course, found myself on the stoop of those stairs outside the event in a bit of a huff about how,
your goal was to go talk to lenders or talk to people and try to get a job.
Talk to anybody.
Talk
to anybody. Tell them my story. Tell them what I'd been through. Told them how I could help change their business. And fortunately, somebody clearly had been watching, and it ended up being a BDM from a lender in the space at the time. And that BDM exited the event, came over to the stoop that I was sitting on and said, if you can do that, you can do anything. And she handed me her card, and she said, "You may want to call this person when you get back to Vancouver." And that person was Marianne Klein of First National. And I called her within a week, and I was hired within a week of that.
And what was your initial? That's such a great. So, what did you learn in that era? This is like the Taylor Swift Eras tour. So, the era of in between school and the mortgage business. What was your big lesson or takeaway from that?
Huge lesson. If no one knows your name, they're never going to give you a chance. It doesn't matter your experience. It doesn't matter your education. You have to take a chance. You've got to really push the envelope. If you want to be seen, you've got to be heard. If you want to be heard, you got to get into the right rooms. You got to get right in front of the right people. And I find today this idea that it is enough to send out a resume. It is enough to wait for opportunities to arise? The simple answer is they don't. If you're not making them, you're not getting them.
Right. Yeah, that's so good. So the first lesson was basically be willing to take the weight of responsibility when you're young. The second one is really about sticking to a long-term goal, even when people are annoying or professors are annoying. And then the third is really about you got to get your name out there. So walk me through kind of what was your role and where did you go from there?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, at the time, they didn't really have an opportunity for me. They didn't actually have a clear path when they decided to give me the job. So I took on the famous role of, and believe it or not, this was what it was called at the time, fax girl. The fax girl who took the faxes off the fax machine, read the name, and then put it in the cubby for the underwriter or the fulfillment specialist. And I know for some generations right now, hearing the fax or what that even means, you'll have to Google later. But for us in our generation, we know that was simply a paper pusher. That was the idea that I was to just do a mediocre task and see where it took me. And the good news is, as usual, I made sure I was seen and I was heard, and I told them what I was capable of. And I continued to reinforce that message through my time at First Nat. And I was able to do quite a few roles before I left.
So how did you go from that job to the next one? So for somebody's listening to this going, okay, I'm not where I want to be. How did you manage to convince them to, again, you don't have the resume technically, right? And you're still pretty young. So how did you go from fax girl to whatever the next stage was?
Great question. So this is all about networking. People really underestimate what networking is. They think it's a handshake. They think it's to get something out of somebody. No, it's not. It's to build a long-term relationship. And I took that really seriously from the very start. So right away, I started assessing everybody in the office. What do they do? What's their role? What's their responsibility? It doesn't take long to find out who the top performers are in a business. It doesn't take long to see who's dedicated. It doesn't take long who's willing to help you. One of the greatest paths of my career has been able to find and nurture relationships that support the direction that I want to go in. And believe it or not, people want to help you. But they only want to help you if you show great interest, if you show engagement, and you show commitment. And I continue to show that over and over again. So I found my people and they found me, and I asked them, what do you do and how do you do it? And the question that has remained with me to this day is, tell me why you're successful. And people will tell you. And they told me. And simply, I did what they did. I didn't recreate the wheel. I didn't try to be something I wasn't. I just took every great idea that was ever told to me and I implemented it.
Right. Can you remember any of those, or is it that stick out to you? I know it was a while ago, but any that stick out? Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. First in, last out. I got there early. I mean, if 90% of the staff showed up at 8:30, I showed up at 8 o'clock.
Right.
And at 4:57, if 90% of the staff were running out the door, I was there till 5:30.
Right.
I'll tell you what happens in that time period. Top performers come in, the management come in. You know, those little moments by the water cooler, those 5-minute conversations after the office gets quiet. And it's a shame because since COVID, that doesn't happen anymore. But that was the time when somebody said, hey, Meg, what are your long-term plans?
So then what was your next kind of major role that you went from there, from fax to what? Or did you go underwriting? Did they put you into sales? Like where did you go?
Yeah, great question. No, I went to funding, and then I went to fulfillment. And then I had this wonderful opportunity to meet at the time the director of sales that was running the national sales team at that moment. And I was able to have an interview. I put my hat in the ring. I was highly discouraged by most people in the office that I didn't have the tenure, number one. But I was very against the idea that I joined a union. But I believe tenure was not an option for me. For the goals and the aspirations that I had in mind, tenure wasn't even in my wheelhouse to think that it.
You were not like, I'm going to put in 10 years and then wait. Like, no. So how long did it take from that fax position to this? To you were applying for 3 months. You were applying for something way above, like jumping multiple rungs.
Absolutely. And I continue to do that. And by the way, I never stopped applying. I applied for every job, any job I could do, job I couldn't do. And I would show up in a suit every single time. It became a bit of a joke. Look at her in the suit. She's applying and showing up in a suit for her own company's job. Well, I'm taking this seriously. And it got noticed. It got really, really noticed. And as I mentioned, I had the opportunity then to have that interview with the director of sales. And this is a story, Scott, I don't think you'd know actually, is I went in for that interview that day. I thought it went incredibly well. Probably didn't, but I thought it did.
Yeah.
And later that evening, there was an event, and it was a broker event. And they kind of asked around the office if anybody wanted to come and volunteer at that event and help out. Absolutely. I'm there. Now, not only can I showcase myself in front of executives and managers, but now I can do it in the presence of clients. So I got down to that event, and I noticed that director of sales was standing with a group of brokers and obviously holding court, having a great conversation. And I walked over and I introduced myself, or attempted to, and the director of sales was very kind, and he said, this is Meg McDonald, and in fact, believe it or not, gentlemen, I interviewed her today to join the sales team. And I turned around and I looked at those clients and I said, and this is the part where he tells me I got the job.
That's pretty bold. What did he say?
And he stuck out his hand and said, congratulations.
Oh, that's so good. So good. So that's how you got the job, basically. You kept applying and then you get this sales job. Okay. So what was the big lesson from you in this era of your career?
Oh, God. Don't be worried about if everybody likes you. Because when you're a top performer, especially in your early days, your existence can rub people the wrong way. Mm-hmm. Because what you hold up as a mirror is a mirror to what they're not doing, a mirror to what they're not saying. They're not angry at me. They're angry at themselves, but it shows up in being angry for me. I remember sometimes eating lunch alone because, once you got the job that everybody's good friend got, nobody wants to sit with you anymore.
Right.
And so they do say leadership can be lonely. I would say it's not so lonely today. I would, in fact, say it's pretty wonderful. But in my early days of no excuses, whatever it takes, it was pretty lonely.
So now let's move along to, you told me there was a period where you were kind of running an insurance thing. I would like to hear about that a little bit. So you basically helped walk. Where was that? How far down the path is that?
That's about 5 years down the path. So at this point, I have wowed enough people to get the attention of Sagen. And at the time it was Genworth. And they put in a very good word for me at, of course, the company I am at today, and that's MCAP. And they said, you got to meet this kid. I mean, let's get real. I was 23 years old. You got to meet this kid. You got to hire. You got to make it happen. And sure enough, I joined them. Right off the hopper. I was 23 years old. I didn't even know that MCAP was a major competitor of First Nationals. All I knew was that they were about to pay me $50,000 as the salary, and that seemed pretty incredible to someone who was in student loan and barely making ends meet. I was a BDM for 5 years, and then I had an opportunity to go to an offsite for MCAP as a deemed top performer. Mm-hmm. And so working my way up as a BDM was challenging in the fact that I was probably one of the youngest BDMs at the time by 15 years. So that was a challenge of not just being a woman, but being a young woman and navigating at a time where the industry was a little rough around the edges when it came to that kind of reception. But I got this opportunity to go to Toronto for top performers, and I had an opportunity to present to the executive. And I took some pretty bold chances during that presentation.
Okay, well, like what? I wanted to spill the tea. Like, what kind of things did you do? What did you do? This is the part where he gives me the job. Like what did you do there?
You know what? I presented the MCAP value proposition.
Which is, that's a bold thing to do as the BDM.
As a BDM,
telling them,
and then I told them where it fell short from a broker's perspective.
Yeah, that's bold.
So it was pretty bold. And the gentleman who hired me to move to Kitchener-Waterloo and work in the MCAP call center where I did sell insurance, his words when he called me, he said, "You were either the smartest woman I've ever met or the dumbest woman I've ever met, because they couldn't fire you once you left that room, because after all, you were a top performer. It would have looked bad." But he goes, "But you took an enormous shot at, at this idea that maybe it wasn't as great as we all thought it was, because you were really pressing the view of our customer on us, and maybe a view or a lens we hadn't seen it through." And as respectfully as it was, it still challenged everything a lot of people had worked really hard for. And that in itself puts you on the outs. But he decided at that time that it was worth taking a shot on me. So he moved me to Kitchener-Waterloo. I didn't even know where it was on the map, to be honest. I went home, told my husband at the time that I had taken this great job opportunity. And he said, "Well, where is it?" I said, "I don't know, but it's called Kitchener-Waterloo." Later that night,
You're thinking it's one name, it's one city, but it's like one name, but it's actually two, right?
It's actually two. And so I end up within 2 months, I end up in their Kitchener office, and I'm running a call center, and I've never run a call center in my life. And then he asks me to sell mortgage insurance. And I mean, first of all, I got to be really clear here. I don't even know at this age that I've called into a call center, let alone worked at a call center, let alone managed a call center. So this is a massive opportunity with a huge cost, the idea that I had no experience in this genre. But this will speak to another lesson that I think is very important for people to know. You may not have the experience in that specific role, but you may have the attributes and the skills of something else that are easily transferable. And so a lot of people will not even apply for jobs that aren't exactly the skill set that they have in the moment. And this actually holds a lot of people back from finding out what their true purpose is, because they pigeonhole themselves into an idea or a craft or a skill, and they don't move out of that. Fortunately enough, I knew nothing about this. So you go in and you're incredibly green. Guess what? Your eyes are open and you're like a sponge. You're willing to take anything in, because you have no ego. You have no place that you've started from before to say, "I know how to do it better than you." And in this process, I was able to really prove myself as someone that was adaptable and flexible based on the attributes that I had throughout the years of my life at this point. And then when I got to this opportunity to sell mortgage life insurance, that's where understanding human nature became my ultimate flex. This was that concept that you're not selling insurance, you're selling a story. And you say, "I'm a great storyteller," but we all are, and we all have a story. And it's who decides to work on it, who decides to listen to that story, who decides to influence that story. That's sales.
Yeah, 100%. Okay, so you get dropped into this job that you don't know anything about. How did you go, and how long were you there? I know you had a fantastic result there, from my understanding.
Yeah, I had fantastic results. I had a beautiful team who was very young, who was willing to take a chance on a new leader. We had a lot of fun. We broke a lot of rules, and we made history. We were breaking every stat that was ever had for insurance. We are starting a trajectory and a change in the way we spoke to customers, in the way that we approached the customer about insurance. And I was about 2 years in, and I resigned.
And okay, so but look, before we move on to the next stage, I want to know, because there's a couple things I want to ask about this. How did you figure out what to do? Because this is like, if you get dropped, this is good for anybody listening, you get dropped into a role that maybe you have some attributes for, but like you didn't know how to do it. So like, how did you figure out what to do? And then how did you scale it? Because I think there's something in there for people to take away.
Yeah, I think there's more information around us all. We just don't look. And I know you and I have had a lot of conversations around curiosity. And I think that's an incredible, valuable attribute that people have if they have it strong. And so right away, when I got dropped into this call center, obviously I utilized the people that are around me, not only my direct manager, but all the leadership. I made connections with all of them. And then I asked them questions. What do you think of this department? How do you think it's run? How would you do it differently? How do you think you might succeed? I spoke to everybody who did the job. What do you like about it? Not like about it? I mean, everybody will tell you everything if you just ask. Most leaders are afraid to ask because they're afraid to look stupid. Most leaders are afraid to ask because they're supposed to, as the leader, to have all the answers. In fact, it's the opposite. You should be the one who sits there in ignorance and says, everyone else tell me how to do it better. Everyone else tell me how I should run this. Everybody tell me how I should feel about this. And then what you're doing really is you're researching. But within 3 months, I knew everything because everybody told me everything. And then I could start to say, well, okay, so if we tweaked this, if we did this, if we talked about it this way, if we had this story, we started looking at our customers differently. We started saying, it's not just about talking about mortgage life insurance, because let's be honest, nobody wants to hear about life insurance.
It's not that exciting of a topic.
It's not that exciting. What's the story behind it? And the story starts with asking the customer really great questions. I notice it's you on the mortgage, Mrs. Smith. And Mrs. Smith, do you have any children? And Mrs. Smith, do you have any family members that are close that are around you? You start having these conversations, and believe it or not, your customers will tell you, oh no, it's just me. It's just me and my 2 kids. Unfortunately, their father passed away a couple of years ago. And then all of a sudden you say, you know what? Given your situation, have you considered mortgage life insurance? No. Well, let's talk about why that might be important for you and your situation. And then you start to learn the stories of different people, and then you start to adapt your sales process. And by the way, let me be clear on something. I don't believe in selling for the sake of selling. I believe in selling something that benefits somebody's life. And because of my life circumstances, coming from a family where a father had a major life event that made it unable for him to support his family, I believe in insurance.
Right.
So I have that all in the background.
Right.
So then I want to find out who the Megan is in that household. I want to know, I want to talk to that mother about the kids that just had the rug pulled out from under them, and the last thing that they want to lose is the home they're living in. So, Scott, part of my story is that not only has my work experience obviously led me to where I am, but it's also my life experiences led me to where I am. Because when you come from it from a lens of a perspective of someone who has seen a lot of things, whether that be trauma or tragedy or illness, you have a deeper passion and conviction for that in that conversation that somebody else just wouldn't have.
Yeah, you're willing to go there because you know the consequences of it. So I think we've talked about this, but you essentially had kind of different avatars because each person has a different, right? Yeah. Is this correct? Like you kind of had avatars for each type of borrower, and then you'd be able to talk to that, paint their potential risks and pitfalls in a meaningful, heartfelt way. And
absolutely.
Yeah, and it created a better connection, and obviously it helped that the department did well, but so did the customers by being taken care of.
Yeah, we got into a room, a lot of us, and we talked about, give me the story of the last customer you spoke to. Next person, give me the story. Well, then what do you think they need? Do you think they're underinsured? What does that even mean? What would it mean to them if they couldn't pay their mortgage next month? And what would you say to them? I'll tell you, there's one incredible skill set that is, again, very misunderstood and very underrepresented in this world, and that's role playing. You should never have a conversation with a client that you haven't already had with somebody else.
That you practice.
Bingo. Yeah. And for some reason, people are really uncomfortable with that. They believe in just winging it. It'll happen for me in the moment. I feel weird. I feel odd when I do it before. No, that's just an insecurity around preparation. And I'm sorry, the greats prepare. The greats prepare. If you think anybody wings anything who's a top performer, don't be fooled. They've put a lot of time and effort into every word, every sentence, every pause, and every influential conversation they have. knowing that if you're not prepared, you won't have the outcome you're looking for. And I was recently speaking to some BDMs on my team about public speaking the other day. And this is very relevant, is that they believed that the outcome you're looking for at the end of a talk or a presentation is that people liked it in the room. And I think it's very misleading. I think instead, how you measure the success of any talk or presentation is that you execute on what you prepared. You should only measure yourself against what you prepared. And by the way, if you didn't prepare anything, you just got lucky.
Right. That sounds like a John Wooden. You know who he was? Like famous coach for NCAA, for UCAA Bruins, 10 national championships.
Yeah.
Yeah. He's all about preparation. Like his practices were timed to the minute, and he had like the performance. And when he showed up to the game, there was no stress. It was just like, we just do what we're trained to do.
Once you learn what preparation is, it's just like going to school. Once you learn how to study, you can study faster. But you can't not do it. You got to do it. And that's the pre-work. That's the not fun, not sexy, not on stage stuff. But I spoke recently at your conference. That was a talk I did 10 years ago. That's the talk I've done probably over 100 times. And when I walked off the stage, I, again, had some great comments. All I kept thinking about was, did I execute on what I prepared? That's how I measure my talk. And at the end of the day, a lot of people will be convinced it's natural, will be convinced I have a gift. You've heard people say that to other speakers.
But so it's practiced so well that you can't tell that it just seems completely natural. Like that's the difference.
That's it. Yeah. That's the difference, is preparation.
Okay, so this phase here, the insurance phase, you grow that really well. And what made you decide, okay, I'm out? What made you put in your red? Like, why did you want to leave? Because it was, from my understanding, it went really well, right? Like, I don't know what the numbers were like. Yeah,
they went phenomenal. So I'm now 31. I'm living in Kitchener. I'm going to the Waterloo office, and I've done everything that I went there to do. And I'm hitting a wall. I don't know what the next step is. And I decide in that moment that the best thing to do is to resign without another job, without any idea of what could happen next. And this is what I call the stage of betting all on Megan.
Yeah.
That based on the idea that I had talked to enough people, that I had shared enough stories, that I had networked a full group of amazing, fabulous people around me, that somebody might say to somebody, hey, there's this great woman named Megan, and she just out of nowhere resigned. You might want to talk to her.
Mm-hmm. So, but then how did you end up back? Because you resigned at MCAP, you didn't leave MCAP. So what happened there?
Yeah, so I gave a healthy 3 months notice, right? I got no job. I got moved out to Kitchener-Waterloo by MCAP. I mean, MCAP's an amazing company. They moved me out there. They moved my whole life out there. And now where am I going? Am I going home? I'm going back to Vancouver. Am I going to Toronto? I have nowhere to go. I don't have a network out there yet. And so the great blessing happened. Somebody said to somebody, hey, have you heard that Megan McDonald has resigned? And that person is a person that is a very good friend of mine. She became, I kind of joke around that she became my agent, like in Jerry Maguire, Show Me the Money.
Yeah.
And her name is Sabrina Coretti, and she had a big heart, and she was wonderful at finding potential. And she had a conversation at the time with someone who you know very well, Paul Bruce.
Yeah.
And she said, have you heard Megan McDonald has resigned? And you got to love Paul Bruce. You know him. He's very straightforward. And he said, who the hell is Megan McDonald, and why should I give a shit?
That's funny. What was his role at the company that time?
So at that time, he was a managing director, and he was he would soon be part of the group that is managing and running MCAP today. At the time, MCAP was almost two separate entities under one umbrella. And so he and others, and as you know, Brian Carey, Jason Wright, Mark Aldridge, they would become the next big executive team. They would take over the journey that MCAP has been on for the past decade that would take us to be the number one financing company in Canada, and would go through the acquisitions of RMG and later Merrick's, as you know, and continued the dream that Paul sold me that day.
So what dream did he sell you on?
Yeah,
to get you to change, basically, I guess you changed departments in a way. You switched
absolutely. At the time, I'm living in Waterloo, and he came out to the Kitchener office, and we were very skittish at the time, kind of like, "Hi, how are you?" You go through all the niceties, and then he did what no one had ever done before. He grabbed a marker and started going to town on a whiteboard. And he built the entire vision of MCAP for the next 5 years. And it wasn't an interview. He's showing me the ideas and the vision that these gentlemen have for the company. And all I could think of was, how do I join the party? I mean, this is the guy who's willing to not only share it with me, but such a vision and clarity. And there was one thing he said to me in that moment. So even though it's all about systems and processes and clients, he says the big words of, and just in case you've missed it, Megan, people really matter to me. And every single person at MCAP really matters. And no one really talked like that. Everybody talked about working hard and working long and getting it done no matter what it takes, and kind of that human element. Prior to that, conversations that I had, people were taking a back seat, and Paul was putting them in the front.
So good. Okay, so chapter 1, you're taking on the weight as a young person. Don't be afraid to take on the weight of responsibility. Chapter 2, university, stick to something for the long term. It builds out your character. Chapter 3, getting that job, stealing the name tag, put yourself out there so people get to know who you are, right? Chapter 4, what would that be? That's like you went from there into, I guess you just showed up, or I guess we didn't ask you there. So in the phase when you were wearing suits and doing the interviews, it was, what did you say? You said, don't be worried if everybody likes you, because you were, that was kind of like, I'm going for this job, even though I just started out. And you had moments where you're sitting by yourself at the lunchroom. And then from there, the next chapter would be the insurance side of it, where they gave you an opportunity because you were willing to take a risk. So that would be like the risk chapter. Like, hey, I said things about the company that most people don't want to hear, but I'm passionate and I want to make this better. Like, I guess there's two ways to look at it. You could come from I'm sharing this because I want to make it better, or I share this because I don't, and I assume you came up at it from, I want to make it better. It wasn't a reflection of the company's terrible. It's just, I want to make it better.
It absolutely you got to make it better. And I will say this, the higher you go, the less you know. That's going to sound funny, but you only know certain things. You only know the bottom line number. You only see the total applications. You don't hear the customer story. And so here I am giving the grassroots company story, not to disappoint them in what they built, but to say, look what you've built, and look what you've built, and these are some of the things that people are talking about that we could do better. I think there's something, I was recently listening to a podcast the other day, and they said there's a big problem with being nice, because when you're often nice, you're not honest. You and I have talked about the concept of criticism and the benefit of being comfortable with criticism. Not that you should take it from people you don't know or trust, but that you should cut through the bull. And you shouldn't do what I like to call the insult sandwich, where I tell you something nice, I tell you something crappy, and then I tell you something nice, and then pat you on the butt and send you away. No, I want somebody who calls me up and says, I got some criticism for you. And when someone does that, who has my best interest at heart, my God, am I grateful, and do I listen?
Right. It's so good. I mean, I could talk to you for hours. I love chatting with you. So we'll wrap up here, but what would be your last sort of if anything you want to share that I didn't ask about that you think are be useful for our listeners?
I think the greatest part of my story is yet to be told. But what has gotten me to this point is other people. And if I could tell anybody, it's not what you do for yourself, it's what you do for other people, and they're going to pay it forward, and then you're given the opportunity to pay it back. And so I have this beautiful opportunity of running an amazing sales team that have become my friends, and we go to the line together. And there is this concept in our industry that we are lone wolves. No, wolves run in packs, and the leader hangs back and does the dirty work and fights people off and protects their team. And when you have the opportunity to lead one day, for those that are listening, if that's your path, you lead fiercely and proudly, and you have a lot of fun, and you have high standards, but you take everything you've ever learned from your life and you do whatever you can to improve the lives of others.
So good. Well, thank you, Megan. I appreciate it. Where can people find you online?
Oh, you can find me on LinkedIn. You can find me on Facebook and Instagram. I'm around. I end up doing a lot of ad hoc coaching conversations because people often slide into my DMs. So it's a pretty great life.
Amazing. Thanks for coming on.
Thank you so much for having me.
Hey, thanks again for listening. Hopefully you're inspired by this conversation. You know, one of the biggest things I always take away from my conversation with Megan is the power of her mindset. She's got an incredibly strong mindset, but it was built and it's maintained through discipline and through action. And one of the things that I believe, you know, I've been coaching brokers now for years, is the importance of mindset. So I just want to let you know that we do a daily, 5 days a week, Monday to Friday, 6 a.m. Pacific mindset call, where we dive into helping you with your mindset. This is a challenging market, challenging business. It's incredibly rewarding, but it's also can be very lonely. If you're interested in finding out about that, you can shoot me a message, click on this episode and find out info about our mortgage mindset daily calls. And the people that are on there are awesome. We're open, we share, and everybody gets better. It's 30 minutes. It will change your business and your life. Check it out. Thanks for listening. I'm Scott Peckford. And as I always say, there's no problem in your mortgage business someone else hasn't already solved. Your problem is finding the person that's already solved it. This podcast is designed to help with that. Thanks for listening, and I will see you on the next episode.